Welcome. So today we're going to dive into a really fascinating analytical toolkit for reading ancient texts. We're going to use some excerpts from a multidisciplinary analysis of Genesis to see how we might just be able to peel back thousands of years of interpretation to get a little bit closer to the original writings.
So let's kick things off with a question that really gets you thinking. This is, the first major hurdle for any kind of historical analysis. How do we even begin to account for the massive gap between our world and the world of someone living, say, 3,000 years ago? It forces us to try and, unlearn what we know, to see the text with fresh eyes.
And this really gets to the heart of what the source material calls the modern knowledge problem. I mean, think about it. Today, with the internet and global travel, we've pretty much seen it all. But this huge amount of exposure creates this 21st century lens that can totally distort how we read these ancient documents.
I mean, just look at this contrast. It's pretty stark, right? An ancient person's world was incredibly local. And this limited exposure meant they had a completely different inventory of mental images and experiences, which of course meant they had a different vocabulary for trying to express new or unusual ideas.
For example, this quote from a certain movie means something galactically different depending on what you know. It's a fun way to illustrate the core challenge, right? How could ancient writers express a unique idea when their audience had such a limited set of common experiences to draw from?
Okay, so our next challenge. It goes beyond just our personal knowledge. We have to look at the text itself. The version we read today isn't some pure original document. It actually contains layers and layers of interpretation that were added long after it was first written.
You know those incredibly convenient markers, the chapters and verses that make everything so easy to find? Well, they're actually medieval inventions. And while they're super useful for referencing things, they are totally arbitrary divisions. The source points out there's no theological support for these specific breaks simply because they weren't part of the original writings at all.
And it goes even further. Things we just take for granted, like section headers, punctuation, and even the vowels in Hebrew. They were all added centuries, and in some cases millennia later. For the most part, these were added during the Masoretic period to help standardize pronunciation and, you guessed it, interpretation.
So here's the crucial point. For a really technical analysis, we have to be skeptical of these structures. We need to recognize that every single one of these additions, from a simple chapter break to a tiny vowel point, is an active interpretation by someone else.
And this brings us to our next layer, because the problem runs even deeper than just the structure. It's baked right into the words themselves. The peculiarities of ancient Hebrew present a massive interpretive challenge.
The earliest Hebrew texts were written in what's called scriptio continua. I mean, just imagine a continuous string of consonants with no breaks. This meant the reader, or a later scribe, had to decide where one word ended and the next began, which of course adds yet another layer of interpretation.
And this example really drives the point home. Ancient Hebrew often has a more limited vocabulary, where a single root word can have a whole bunch of different meanings depending on the context. Look at the root for evening. It can also mean mixed. The root for morning can also mean to inquire. You can see how a translator's preconceived ideas are almost impossible to avoid.
Okay, so enough theory. Let's actually put this toolkit into action. We're going to use this analytical framework to take a fresh look at a very famous recurring phrase from the Genesis creation narrative. We all know this one, right? There was evening and there was morning. Traditionally, it's just read as a simple timekeeper, marking the end of a 24-hour day. It seems super straightforward. But what happens when we apply our new understanding of Hebrew?
So, let's play with this a bit. What if we plug in those other, totally valid meanings we just saw? What if evening actually means a mixture, and morning means an inquiry?
And just like that, the phrase completely transforms. It's no longer just about marking time. Instead, it becomes a beautiful summary of a creative process, an act of mixing things together, followed by an act of inquiry or inspection to see how it turned out. It describes a whole process of formation.
And that really leaves us with a final thought. This analytical approach doesn't give us the one right answer, but what it does do is equip us with much better questions. It reveals this incredible depth and complexity hiding just beneath the surface of the text, and it kind of forces us to ask, if this much is packed into just one familiar phrase, what else are we missing?